Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that winter has arrived. There is no heater, no grocery store, no warm car waiting outside, no insulated house protecting you from the freezing wind. And the worst part? Winter isn't going to last for a few days. It could last for months. For ancient humans, winter wasn't a beautiful season filled with snow and cozy nights. It was a countdown. Every day, the temperature dropped lower. The plants disappeared. The animals became harder to find. The nights became longer. And every mistake could bring you one step closer to death. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors faced winters without modern technology, without electricity, and without the comfort we take for granted today. Yet somehow they survived. They walked into some of the coldest environments on Earth and managed to come out alive. But they didn't survive by simply being stronger than the cold. They survived by learning how to fight it. They discovered ways to trap heat against their bodies. They built shelters from materials that seem almost impossible to imagine. They turned freezing temperatures into refrigerators. They stored food months before winter arrived. And when darkness swallowed the world for hours at a time, they found a way to survive that too. But some of their survival methods were so extreme that they reveal just how terrifying winter really was. Because winter didn't attack ancient humans with one weapon. It attacked them from every direction. The cold could kill you. Hunger could weaken you. The darkness could break you mentally. And if your shelter failed, the wind itself could become a death sentence. So how did ancient humans survive the darkest winters in human history? The answer begins with the most obvious enemy. The cold. Here's something that might surprise you. The human body was never designed for extreme cold. Our ancestors evolved in relatively warm environments. We don't have thick fur like a polar bear. We don't have the natural insulation of a seal. We don't have massive layers of body fat covering us from head to toe. And once temperatures fall far enough, the human body begins losing heat faster than it can replace it. Your fingers become stiff. Your muscles slow down. Your thinking becomes confused. And eventually, your body begins shutting down. Today, if the temperature becomes unbearable, you can simply walk inside. Ancient humans didn't have that option. If they were caught outside without protection, the cold could kill them. So how did they survive? The first answer was fire. Fire was one of humanity's greatest weapons against winter. It provided warmth. It provided light. It allowed people to cook food. And it could even help protect a group from dangerous animals. But fire had one enormous weakness. It couldn't follow you. The moment you walked away from it, the cold came rushing back. You could sit beside a fire and feel warm on one side of your body while your back remained freezing. And if you needed to leave the shelter to hunt, gather food, or collect more firewood, you were once again exposed. So ancient humans needed something more. They needed to carry warmth with them. And that led to one of the most important technologies in human history. But the first clothing wasn't anything like the jackets we wear today. Imagine simply throwing an animal hide over your shoulders. It would help, but wind could still enter from the sides. Your arms remained exposed. The hide could move around while you walked. And in a brutal winter, that could be the difference between surviving the night and never seeing morning. The real breakthrough came when humans learned to transform animal hides into fitted clothing. Instead of simply wearing a skin, they could cut it into pieces, shape it, and stitch it together. Suddenly, clothing could wrap around the body. It could cover the arms, seal openings, and trap a layer of warm air close to the skin. Suddenly, the same species that had evolved in warm environments could now walk into freezing landscapes. They could move farther north. They could survive in places where an unprotected human body would have little chance. But even the best clothing couldn't solve the next problem. Because once the sun disappeared, you needed somewhere to survive the night. And that's where things became even more difficult. When most people imagine ancient humans surviving winter, they probably picture a cave. And caves certainly helped. A good cave could block the wind. It could protect people from snow. And underground spaces could maintain a more stable temperature than the freezing world outside. But there was one major problem. Good caves were rare. A dry cave in the right location with enough space and protection, wasn't something every group could simply find. And if one group found a good cave, there was no guarantee that another group wouldn't want it. So ancient humans had to learn something incredibly important. If nature didn't provide a shelter, they had to build one. And some of the shelters they created were extraordinary. At sites in what is now Ukraine, archaeologists discovered evidence of ancient dwellings built during the Ice Age. But these people didn't have forests full of timber surrounding them. They didn't have modern bricks or concrete. Instead, they used what the environment gave them. Mammoth bones. Large bones were arranged and interlocked to create enormous circular structures. Jawbones could form parts of the walls. Tusks could help create entrances or structural supports. And dozens of mammoths could contribute materials to a single shelter. Imagine standing outside one of these structures during an Ice Age winter. The wind is screaming across the frozen landscape. Snow covers the ground. The temperature continues to fall. And inside, a group of humans is gathered around a fire, protected by a shelter they constructed from the remains of animals that once dominated the landscape. But building the shelter was only the beginning, because every gap in the walls was a potential entrance for the freezing wind. So ancient people had to seal those gaps. They used animal hides. They used vegetation. They used earth. And in some environments, snow itself could become part of the insulation. This might sound strange, but thick snow contains countless tiny pockets of trapped air. And trapped air can help slow the movement of heat. So the same substance that made the outside world dangerous could also help protect the people inside. The shelter was no longer just a wall. It was a system. The walls blocked the wind. The hides helped seal openings. The insulation helped hold warmth. And the fire provided heat. And this created a terrifying possibility. You could have a perfectly good shelter. You could have fire. You could have clothing. And still die. Because you didn't store enough food. That's why preparation was everything. During a harsh winter, hunting wasn't always possible. Animals could migrate away. Storms could make travel dangerous. And sometimes, leaving your shelter could be more dangerous than staying inside. So the food you collected before winter could become the food that kept you alive for months. This meant ancient humans had to think ahead. They needed to know when winter was coming. They needed to know how much food they would need. And they needed to know how long the supplies had to last. One of the most important techniques was drying meat. Fresh meat spoils quickly. But when meat is cut into thin strips and dried, much of the moisture is removed. That makes it much harder for bacteria to grow. Dried meat could last far longer than fresh meat. And in a world where winter could last for months, that difference was enormous. But meat wasn't the only thing they needed. Fat was incredibly valuable. It provided a huge amount of energy. And cold environments demanded enormous amounts of energy just to keep the body warm. A person could eat a lot of lean meat and still struggle to get enough calories. So ancient hunters often valued animals not just for their meat, but for the fat, organs, marrow, and hides. Nothing could afford to be wasted. Because once winter arrived, there was no guarantee that another successful hunt would come. And that's where the darkest part of winter survival began. The cold was dangerous, but darkness created another problem. Winter nights could feel endless. There was no electricity, no artificial lighting. Every bit of light had to come from something they burned. Wood, animal fat, bone, or other available fuel. And fuel had to be collected and stored. If you ran out, the fire went out. And if the fire went out during a freezing night, restarting it could be incredibly difficult. So ancient humans developed ways to keep fire alive for as long as possible. They learned which fuels burned longer. They learned how to control airflow. And they learned to use shelters to trap warmth around the fire. The fire wasn't just for warmth. It was the center of survival. It cooked food. It provided light. It helped dry clothing. It could even help smoke and preserve food. But perhaps the most important thing the fire provided was psychological. It created a place where humans could gather, share food, tell stories, and survive the darkness together. Because winter survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about staying human when the world outside was trying to take everything away. But sometimes, even preparation wasn't enough. When food became scarce, humans faced choices that were far darker than simply going hungry. In extreme conditions, people could be forced to eat whatever food was available. This could mean eating animals that would normally be avoided, using every part of an animal. And in the most extreme cases, archaeological evidence suggests that some ancient communities may have turned to cannibalism. Not because they were monsters, but because starvation can push humans into unimaginable decisions. And that is perhaps the darkest truth about surviving an Ice Age winter. The cold wasn't the only enemy. Hunger, exhaustion, darkness, and isolation could be just as deadly. And surviving required every skill humans had developed. And yet, somehow they survived. They survived because they adapted. They learned from every winter. Every failed hunt taught them something. Every failed shelter taught them how to build a better one. Every harsh winter pushed human technology forward. And every generation passed that knowledge to the next. That knowledge became the difference between a group that disappeared and a group that survived. So when we imagine ancient humans facing winter, we shouldn't picture helpless people simply waiting for the cold to end. We should picture skilled survivors. Hunters, builders, tailors, engineers, and survivors who understood that every mistake could cost a life. The darkest survival methods weren't always about violence. Sometimes they were simply about enduring what nature demanded. And somehow, generation after generation, they endured. So the next time you feel cold and reach for a jacket, remember, there was a time when staying warm meant mastering fire, building shelters from bones, preserving every piece of food, and surviving nights that seemed to have no end. And somehow they did it. They survived the darkest winters humanity had ever faced.